Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have an ice warning issued for Scotland tonight into tomorrow morning. We'll then have a look at the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature as it's fairly mild for the next 3 or 4 days with generally unsettled conditions further northwards, drier further southwards, but we will see mixing within those sort of regimes. However, towards day 5 we're going to be seeing a northerly wind arrive, and this is likely to bring the start of a cold end to February. Now, we are still uncertain exactly how cold it will be, but the one thing we do have for certain is it's mostly probably going to be easterly winds. We're going to be seeing the wind direction come in from the east, but it's whether it will be a northeasterly with Arctic air coming in, or whether it be more of a southeasterly with cool continental air, but nothing particularly cold. Cool enough to give overnight frost probably, and in the day temperatures probably around average. So we'll have to see exactly what happens, but it does look likely, regardless of the exact wind direction, it will be a generally cool or cold end to February, with the chance of snow in places, especially initially, more uncertain later on, as we are still sort of deciphering what sort of air mass we will see. There are some extremer runs we are starting to see for the start of March, and I think that's because the sudden stratospheric warming is starting to play with the models. We'll show you those, but I must say it is very uncertain and very volatile. We'll just have to see how it does develop. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So if we do start on the live radar, you can see it's quite a cloudy, drizzly picture out there at the moment, with a lot of light, patchy showers around. We saw a weather front move through earlier, and that's brought through this sort of cloudy, drizzly sort of pattern. It's generally quite mild out there with temperatures in the low teens, but wherever you see some of these showers, it will not be particularly pleasant. Now, many areas haven't seen a lot of rain the last few weeks, so for some it will be welcome rain, others it'll be quite annoying if you've got any outdoor plans, but still plenty of areas will have probably avoid the precipitation for most of the day and will have a generally mild but cloudy rest of the day. Now, if you put on the temperatures, as I said, it is generally quite mild at the moment. You can see we've got these thick yellows for many parts of England, Wales, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, showing those temperatures in the low to have even potentially mid-teens. We have seen a few areas get above 15 degrees the last few days, up to 16, 17. Again, not too unusual to see something like that sort of in isolation, but we're seeing it for a number of days, and we are seeing it in quite a few locations, so it is really quite mild at the moment. However, in Scotland, we're still hanging on to a colder air mass. So you can see over the Highlands, we've got some quite cold air, and that's why we've got that ice warning. Cold in the north, as I said, milder in the south. But of course, the colder air in the north, because it's mixing with the milder air, mean there's going to be more precipitation in Scotland, inevitably. If you put on the weather warnings, we do have an ice warning issued for Scotland from midnight tonight until 8 a.m. tomorrow. Again, rain and hill snow will clear central and southern parts of the area during Saturday evening, with the risk of showers further north, leaving surfaces wet overnight, and this will lead to icy patches on untreated surfaces. So where we've seen some precipitation over the coming hours, sort of over the next 12 hours or so, we will see eventually, when the clouds do clear, those temperatures dropping away, and we will see ice forming. A high likelihood lower end of the impact. So nothing too crazy, but there could be some problems out there if you are on untreated surfaces. So do now go over to the UKV and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. You can see that weather front that moved through earlier, giving some snow over the Highlands of Scotland, elsewhere generally cloudy and a drizzly feel for the rest of the day. Into this evening it should clear away and there shouldn't be too much rain around, but overnight into tomorrow morning, some more rain approaching for Scotland, and that will give quite a soaking in places through Sunday afternoon. Elsewhere it is generally dry but still quite cloudy, maybe apart from the far south and southwest. As we head into Monday, another weather front spreading in. Again, coming up against the higher pressure, just fizzle away further southwards, but still could give rain and thicker cloud in places. And then into Wednesday, we see quite a vigorous vigorous weather front there, with a bit of light convection, showing very strong temperature contrast, and that's because we've got milder air getting pushed away by some quite cold Arctic air, starting that cooler end, or even colder end to the month. As you can see, the weather front eventually spreads through, and we see a lot more pink starting to appear. That is snow and generally wintry showers. A lot of these showers, even if they are falling as rain initially, with evaporative cooling and temperatures dropping overnight, will have a wintry flavour to them, even to low-lying areas, because we are in quite a cold air mass. As we head into Thursday, you can see it is slightly drier, and that's because we've got an Arctic air mass, but wherever we see some convection taking place near the coast, and perhaps even inland with more solar radiation towards the end of February, we could see some wintry showers starting to develop. And again, we put on the air mass, you can see it is quite a cold air mass, -6 to -8 degrees at 850 HPA, and the wind is just going to be veering in from the northeast to easterly direction for the foreseeable future after this, so remaining fairly chilly, if not quite cold. Uncertain though in the final days of February whether it turns into more of a milder southeasterly, still chilly, but nothing exceptionally cold, or more of a sort of Arctic northeasterly. If you look at the max temperatures, you'll be able to see huge temperature contrast coming over the next 5 days. Right now, this afternoon is 13 to 15 degrees quite widely through central and southern areas, much colder in Scotland. Overnight tonight, again, temperatures will be around freezing in Scotland, high single digits further southwards, and into tomorrow afternoon, temperatures in the south 10 to 13 degrees, cooler further northwards. As we head into Monday, again, those temperatures into the afternoon, perhaps 10 to 14 degrees, further northwards, cooler still. However, into Tuesday, it starts to cool down slightly, maybe more 9 to 11 degrees, and eventually into Wednesday, you see that much colder air mass spreading in, and for many areas into Wednesday, it won't get much above 5 or 6 degrees, back down to average, if not starting to get below average. And then as we head into the early hours of Thursday, widespread frost in the north and west, where we do have clearer skies, but still some areas hanging on to some milder air at the surface, so may keep it slightly above freezing. But it is a much colder air mass, and it will be turning a lot colder in the subsequent days. If you do now have a look at the longer range and go over to the GFS and see what that is producing over the course of the next couple of weeks. Now we'll have a look at the 6 o'clock run, but also we'll have a look at the midnight run, because it does do something quite severe in the longer term that could be coming as a consequence of the sudden stratospheric warming, but there's not a lot of certainty with it, so I don't want to concentrate on it too much, but still want to present it as an option into early March. So at the moment, we've pretty much got a flat westerly. The jet stream here can't really get more flat than this, and it will continue to stay fairly flat and westerly all the way until next week, before it becomes slightly more amplified as we see that northerly wind come in. Now, sometimes you'd see this high pressure just topple, but instead it builds to our north and pulls in an easterly wind. This is where we start to have uncertainty. Are we going to drag in this colder air towards Scandinavia and Russia, or are we going to drag slightly milder air down from the Mediterranean? Now, the GFS here initially has much colder air drifting in, for eventually veers more south easterly, so slightly milder. It does have a go at building more of a block towards Greenland, but into the longer term does turn us more unsettled. Importantly though, you can see all these purples from the start of the run were over northern Canada, and the end of the run are over Russia, again showing the tropospheric polar vortex is moving, again perhaps a consequence of the displacement event, sudden stratospheric warming high up in the atmosphere. This just means that a lot colder air is drifted to our side of the pole, towards the Russian side, and it means if we did get any more blocking, if we did build a Scandinavian high, there's a lot colder air to tap into in early March. But for this run, it does go cold next week. If we put on the upper air temperatures, cold, and then we start to put in even colder easterly winds, for eventually we do start to drag in slightly milder air for the last couple of days of February into the first few days of March. And you can see that the 0 degree isosphere moving in, and eventually slightly milder air coming in the longer term. But of course, I did want to highlight the midnight run. If we do run it back and put on the 500 HPA potential heights, you can see easterly wind coming in, and that's what we saw from the 6 o'clock run. But this is where it diverges. We see the high pressure retrogress up towards Greenland, and look what happens here. A north and northeasterly winds, all that cold air that's been displaced to Russia is starting to drift towards Europe, and we go into a bitterly cold northeasterly flow, and this would send us into the absolute freezer, -10 isotherm, engulfing the whole of the UK. Again, the temperature deviation, huge milder patch towards northeast Canada and Greenland, bitterly cold air into Europe, and you can see how we're seeing a displacement event of the colder air, and then again this is typical of a sudden stratospheric warming. You see cold air pulling out into the mid-latitudes, much warmer air towards Greenland and northern Canada in general, and again we put on the potential equivalent temperatures. And you can see, just look how cold that air is coming in. That would give ice days, that would give widespread snowfall. Remember, it is one run, but this is the sort of thing we could see as a result of the SSW. If you do run over to the GEM now and see how that does compare, again, a flat westerly at the moment. Again, progressing beyond that, we stay fairly unsettled in the north, drier in the south, and then eventually we see that northerly wind come in. The high pressure builds to our north, it pulls initially a cold easterly in for slightly milder easterly towards the last couple of days. Again, you can see this with the 0 degree isophone coming back in, perhaps potentially even slightly milder than that. But of course, that is the upper air temperatures towards the surface. It probably will stay still relatively chilly. Again, we'll have to see how it does develop. Slight shifts in this high pressure system will drag more of this colder air towards Scandinavia and Eastern Europe our way, but we will have to see how it does develop. This would generally be a cold, frosty pattern, but nothing exceptionally cold. Now, if you do finish by having a look at the ECMWF, you can see again westerly flow at the moment, northerly winds coming in, and eventually it veers more easterly. However, ECMWF definitely is more on board with a southeasterly. You can see a much milder flow there. Initially cold, but turning quite a bit milder. But of course, that is at the upper air temperatures, not at the surface, where it's likely to still remain fairly chilly, but no chances of anything like snow or anything like that. Would just generally be average in the day and probably frosty overnight. We'll of course have to see. This big high pressure system could retrogress further northwards and westwards like it did in the GFS midnight run, producing something a lot colder into early March. But again, we will have to see exactly how it does play out. Regardless, it's an interesting pattern, still has got some cold potential, but at this stage we're not expecting anything imminently very cold, potentially cold, but most likely just generally chilly and below average. But we will have to, as I said, see. If you do finish by looking at the ensembles, the GFS ensembles are very much on the colder end. At the moment, so you can see mild for the next 3 or 4 days, big 10 degree temperature drop down towards -5, if not lower than that, and staying around that for a good 5-6 days. Slowly returning towards average with a big spread, with some very cold runs, but also some very mild runs. Again, uncertainty into the start of March, but the end of February here looks reasonably cold and chilly in general, with some precipitation. Again, you'd expect showers with that easterly flow. Again, look at the dew points, they are pretty cold, down towards freezing at 850 HPA, again meaning things falling out of the sky could have a wintry flavour in most areas. Again, can't say if it will be exactly snow, but sort of growlpool, hail, sleet and snow showers expected quite widely if we did see that cooler, colder air mass. Of course, if those upper air temperatures rise above freezing, then that becomes much less likely. If we do look at the ECMWF ensembles, they're a lot more pessimistic though on those upper air temperatures. You can see we do still see that temperature drop, potentially down to -5 for a day or two, but returning more towards average. Again, there are more ensemble members, so of course there's going to be more spread, but there's real no certainty within these ensemble members at all, really, towards the early part of next week, with some going quite cold, some even go down to the -10 level for the last couple of days of February, others up towards the +10 degree level. So ECMWF ensembles much less sure. Perhaps the GFS is just being over-egging it, and definitely sort of too confident in the potential scenario, and perhaps the ECMWF is much more likely in terms of having a big spread at the moment. But we'll have to see what it does converge on over the next day or two, because of course we're only 5-6 days away from the colder air arriving, so we're going to have to decipher this within the next 24 to 48 hours really. But once again, regardless of what happens in the next week or so, the longer term still looks very, very uncertain, with huge amounts of spread. Generally, the average is of the ensemble members is well above the 1981-2010 mean, but we can't say exactly what that does show at this stage, because there is, as I said, still a lot of spread. And of course, the SSW is not going to be well modelled at all. It's going to be very volatile, so we'll have to just keep an eye on what happens. So anyway, thanks for watching. It's going to be turning colder next week. Just how cold, how intense that cold will be, and how widespread it will be, and of course how long it lasts, we can't say for certain, but it will be turning chillier, at least down towards average, if not below average, and there will be the risk of snow in the north, potentially more widely in towards the end of next week as well. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, I'll see you again for another video soon.